Welcome to another episode of COVID Chronicles here in Tosha Heights Private Reserve. And we are joined today by Dr. Aschenborn from the School of Veterinary Science at the University of Namibia. And he will just take us through what happened today where we were dutting animals. Doctor, tell us what happened today.
Yeah, I think we had a good day. We managed to get 4 eland and 4 kudus. Nothing died, nobody got injured. That's always priority number one, safety first. Helicopters, cars, dangerous animals, dangerous drugs. So we always happy if a day goes well, and today went extremely well. We had no issues. We started off with an eland out here in the south western corner, and then another very nice big pregnant female cow, and then 2 kudus. They ran quite a lot, kept us chasing a bit for a while. And then after that another eland and another kudu. Quite successful for the day.
No, I think it kept us all fit after today's exercise. But just touching on one of the elands, it was a bit of a mission to get her down. I think you had to dot like 3 times while you're in the helicopter. But why was that the case?
Yeah, it's always a bit difficult when you start on a new place for the first time. Last year, this time, the animals were really, really thin. Very few of them were pregnant. After the good rains we had, luckily, at least in some parts of the country, this season, the animals are very different conditions. So, and heavily pregnant. And then sometimes they don't go down very easily. And then you don't want to overdose, but you also sometimes don't want to give too little. So we had to fiddle around a bit and get the dosages right. And she was extremely big. She was huge. You saw her. She's like a beautiful specimen of an eland. We had that huge female, and then later we didn't go for the biggest females in the herd. It was also interesting to see she was definitely the leading cow in the group. All the other youngsters wanted to stick around, didn't want to leave even when the chopper was very close to her. So we get the leading cow there, so it'll be quite interesting to see her movements and follow up what she's up to.
Okay. So as well, part of the study, I saw the students that are with the whole program were also taking some samples, some nasal swabs, some droppings as well as blood. But what is that going to be used for? I thought we were looking at migration and...
Yeah, we while we have the animals, it's always good to collect as much as possible, because the capture is stressful to the animal, and ethically it is important that you make the most of each capture. It is also always a risk to the animal, even though we normally don't have problems, but we have to keep in mind it is a potential risk. So from a scientific point of view, even if you don't have a plan for every sample, you should collect as much as possible and keep it in a biobank and then use it in the future for project research. Then you don't need to re-immobilize some additional animals if you need samples. We do have a study on viruses. We've got some guys doing PCR at our university for viral diseases. So that's the nasal swabs. There's a bit of parasite work going on, looking at nematodes in the fecal samples, and then some goes into the biobank for future work as projects come along. And often you start thinking about questions as you get the data from the movement. You say, wow, what's happening here? And then sometimes it is good to have baseline samples, even if you don't really have the question yet. The question will come in future.
Yeah, and I think also very good to, when you take the samples, it's easier also if with the tracking of the animal, let's say 3 months, 6 months down the lane, if you were to collect samples again from the same cow, sort of comparison to see if it's actually still in good shape or what is the next step with in regard to the research.
When we have our students do undergrad research projects, and if we have enough material, it helps also there to put them onto some sensible project. And we feel obviously wildlife is very sensible, so we try to collect as much as possible material that they can work on in future then.
Okay.
And training, I mean, sampling is part of the job later, so we try to give each student the opportunity to collect each sample and process the samples, keep the records, do the drugs, so get all aspects of the job.
Practical work to the theory.
Yep. That's the highlight of the course, going out 2 weeks here in the bush, doing the real stuff instead of just in the books and the papers.
No, that was exciting today. Just the whole experience, I think, being able to catch these animals and still leaving them in their natural habitat and making sure that we don't disturb them. I know it was a bit of a challenge with the helicopter, but I think we did reach our objective at the end of the day.
No, very good day, I think, and I got to do the nice job up in the cod chopper. You guys on the ground get the dusty and the hard job, so I'm also very happy.
You definitely got all the nice shots, eh?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, no. All right, thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, cool.
Definitely was a very eventful day, and stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. Let's see what it has in store for us. So these 4 days of capturing all of this wildlife was quite special for me because I've never experienced it before, and it just shows me in how one discipline can help the other basically benefit for a greater goal. So we had a very successful week here at Tosha Heights Private Reserve, where we joined Dr. Morgan and the vets from the University of Namibia. So they managed to collar all the animals that they wanted for the study, and it was such a fantastic experience to see so many disciplines come together for the greater good, whether it's the vets from the University of Namibia, the researchers from NUST, whether it's the students from Germany, and it was great to see all of us sort of come together and really join forces and try and really get this project running.
We've had a pretty intense wildlife capture event over the last few days. I'm extremely happy with the outcome of it. And when we're running off in all these different directions, it's quite important just to again bring it back to the picture. You know, where does collaring a eland in the far west of the park fit into the entire project of looking at these animal movements across different landscapes? We're dealing here with a project that's really quite ambitious in looking at multiple aspects, multiple scientific disciplines coming together to try to monitor an entire ecological systems and what drives the movements of wildlife, particularly the herbivores, the primary consumers, on a savanna landscape like we have here in Etosha, in the Etosha area, should I say.
All right, on my left-hand side is the fence between Etosha National Park and a private reserve, which is Tosha Heights Private Reserve. And this also ties into the study that is being done by Dr. Morgan, that basically that between what is the migration of the wildlife from the national park into the private reserve and vice versa, and why are the animals having these migration patterns. So this has been done by elephants, which is again one of the problems that we do have, which is damage from the elephants. But all of this ties into the study on exactly either with the damage, why are the animals, which is the herbivores and the browsers and grazers, still going onto the other side or coming from the other side into this side.
This whole multiple land use type is important in terms of our hypothesis that how you manage the land and also the type of land unit that you have. So a national park of 2.5 million hectares compared to a private nature reserve, 4, 5 or 6 farms together, compared to a very small unit. So we call it kudu and giraffe in a very small 1,000 hectare farm as well. So if you compare all this, how do wildlife survive in these different places? And not just how do they survive, how do they affect the entire ecosystem? So where they're going, what is causing them to be there? Is it because of the grazing that's there, good quality grazing? And is that because of the good soils? Is that because the soils that they're on retain enough moisture? So all the empirical data that we have, we're trying to put together into a model to look at this savanna dynamics. Now, you can never do everything together, but having different aspects with the proper data into it is just something that's really important, I think, not just for Namibia, but I think globally, to sort of rediscover the dynamics in savannas on a scientific basis. They didn't actually just find their way there, meander and graze. They knew exactly where they was going. If I highlight one individual, it might take a while to come up. So I'm just clicking on that individual. You can see that there was intent to move. There was knowledge of the fence being porous. Here we go. In the blue, you can see the movements of that individual animal. But remember, like yesterday, we collared a springbok in quite a large herd. So this particular herd is about 60 animals. So that represents a herd of 60 animals moving. And what's interesting is when they came back. So when they went, okay, there was a little bit of grazing here, but the narrow lines tell you they knew exactly where they were going. And that is about 80 kilometers that they've moved. And that means a decision. So they were very happy around here for about 6 months. And then a decision was made, we need to cross the fence. They found a hole in the fence that the elephants probably caused. And they moved where they lambed. Then they came back, because remember, we have to download the data from these animals remotely, which means we've got to be within about 1 kilometer of the springbok to download it. So in May, when I downloaded the data there, they were back. And they're still here. And you can see when they came back, this is also really, really interesting. There, they knew exactly we have to get back. They came down here, and at the time there was a crew that was fixing the Etosha fence. So the fence was fixed, they couldn't get in, so they grazed around here for a while until the elephants came and broke down the fence again and said, we can come in. And now they're back where they were. So there's a very, very big reliance of the animals on that. And what's really cool about it is you have ancient ecological processes, the pan, dominant wind direction, taking all these nutrients out of the pan here, having nutritious grazing on top of that because the soils are more nutritious, and the animals using that as their decision-making process. And the more compatible land use you can have within these ecosystems, like Tosha Heights, tourism only, tourism and conservation, no hunting, same as the national park. This should be allowed, this sort of movement, because of the compatible land uses. So that's why this landscape conservation idea is so important. Also, we have the communal conservancies to the west, Erevapuko up here, Kolikoas in this area. And this is one of the few areas where we can look at the
movement of wildlife between communal and commercial areas. We generally look at it either in communal areas or commercial. So when the Ministry of Environment collared these animals, it created a very nice opportunity through the project to look at what would happen and what are the decisions that they're making between a communal and commercial interface.
You see, with university, it's very, sometimes I tend to feel it's very theoretical and there's no that practical element to it, or either the practical element would be very short. So that has always been the gap that needed bridging, and it helps to have like with the vet students that we're here for the 4 days, that constant exposure and experience on what they're going to be dealing with. It helps not only with building confidence, but understanding the discipline that they chose and getting the love for the industry that they're about to head in. And that doesn't only go for veterinary science, but it goes for any other program that is offered by the university, especially for us to focus on tourism, understanding how tourism is it's a bigger picture. It's not just looking at animals and looking at the lodging part, the hotels and booking accommodations.
I think one of the important things of Namibian tourism and for some of the problem-causing animals is that we try to create benefit to the communities that actually have the problems also, to keep these animals in the large free-ranging environment. I mean, one of the species is wild dogs. They are extremely difficult to find. They are extremely time-consuming to find. So for the average tourist, it is a problem to spend so much time to try and see them. Some of these animals end up in captivity and they're easier to see, or they're collared, and tourists are taken there because they're collared. But the people that live with the cost of preserving these species often do not get the benefit from the tourism. And I think that is a link that still needs to be established. There are talks of something like ecosystem service payments to people that live with these problem animals, even though they don't benefit from the tourism itself, or some form of exclusive tourism. But unfortunately, the major part of the tourists do not really visit. For example, if we talk wild dogs, the Omaheke region deep in that bush where the wild dog lives and causes problem to the communities. The same with some of the lions, the hyenas. And I have no answers, I don't know how to do it, but somehow the benefit of preserving these species must filter through the people that really have the cost of living with these animals. So I'm very much in favor of trying to conserve animals in areas where they live freely. But yeah, often the tourism potential in these areas is really low and complicated to tap into. And that needs a lot of thought and innovative processes, both from government, from the conservancies and the tourism sector. I think it's a very important step forward if we want to preserve these pristine, large ecosystems where the animals live at fairly low densities and undisturbed. So we started seeing cases of poisoning of vultures deliberately in where I worked at that point was Caprivi 2012. We had incidences where poachers poisoned carcasses to kill the vultures, because that's how a lot of the park staff pick up on poached animals. And one incident, for example, we estimate that more than 400 white-backed vultures and some of the other vultures got poisoned. And that actually led me to the plan of actually tagging quite a number of vultures and then picking up on cases of poisoning of vultures. When then our first challenge actually was that the technology available isn't really good enough to pick up on poisoning cases fast enough. So over the last couple of years we've been testing and trying and developing different types of loggers, GPS loggers that you can track vultures with, trying communication systems. The problem is often that when they get poisoned, they're somewhere on the ground without cell phone reception, so you need satellite reception, but satellite modules were quite big back then. They've gone down quite a bit in size now, so we can now have little GPS iridium transmitted trackers with less than 50 grams. So that's been quite good advances in technology that we have worked with and developed. The other thing is wildlife crime in some areas has gone down a bit, so that's favorable to the vultures. In other areas, unfortunately, it's gone up. I think human-wildlife conflict is another potential for poisoning. Vultures are not always poisoned directly targeting the vultures. Sometimes it is targeting other predators, often lions. They go out, they cause problems. Some of the farmers poison carcasses trying to kill the vultures, the lions, or trying to poison hyenas or trying to poison jackal, and the vultures are just poor bystanders who are trying to do the ecological role and get poisoned. The vultures unfortunately don't have this charismatic place in our social media and in our minds as lions or leopards or rhinos or elephants. They are unfortunately not one of the pretty animals, but they fulfill very important ecosystem functions. They remove dead animals that might cause disease spread, so they're extremely important, and they are definitely very important species to preserve for the future and for the ecosystem health. In Namibia we have lost quite a few vultures. Exact numbers are difficult to get. A lot of these poison cases do go undetected. That's why we want to tag much more vultures to see what's really happening out there. This area of Namibia, the most common one and occurring in big flocks, are the white-backed vultures. They do travel extremely long distances, so the problem with these cases is that if you have a few hundred dead vultures, they can be from Botswana, from South Africa, from Angola, from Zambia, Zimbabwe, so they get drawn in from very, very far regions. We picked up tags of dead vultures that came from South Africa, so we do know that they travel extremely wide. Also with these GPS loggers, some of the vultures we tagged in the Kunene region, they moved all the way to South Africa, Botswana. So it's a shared population, and when people see these large numbers of vultures at a carcass, at a kill, they always think, oh, there's plenty of vultures around. So it often creates the wrong impression, because these vultures do come from extremely far areas. There's also effort from MET to monitor the breeding success in Etosha Park. That is a definite stronghold to the vulture population in this region. They do breed in the park, and in some years quite successfully. So we have some of our vultures tags moving in and out for breeding into Etosha.
If you look at the GDP contributors of Namibia, tourism was the third, and slowly I'm looking at it overtaking the second, because tourism is the fastest growing industry, and it's the link between conservation and getting the information out there. So in terms of, we as tourism enterprises, we provide financial support and exposure for such programs. You know, in Namibia there's a lot of programs or projects that are happening, but no one ever brings light to them. And because of tourism and us taking out guests, whether it's to accommodations that have a bigger picture and that are doing more than just lodging, it creates exposure for the project, and it creates financial support. And I think that's what tourism brings in to the big picture. And definitely with this pandemic that we have faced right now, not only are we as tourism hit, but everyone that's linked to tourism is also hit. And all the support that we then used to give to tourism is basically gone, or that we used to give to conservation projects is gone.